Welcome to The More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics, or as we like to call it, real debate without the hate. Hello, I'm Kevin Kelton. I'm a moderate Democrat from Los Angeles, California.
I'm Cliff Dunn, a horse Republican from Newport News, Virginia this week.
Not a horse's ass, just horse.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'm Greg Machuzak, a liberal Democrat from Cincinnati, Ohio. Cliff, you're killing me this week.
That didn't take long.
I'm Molly Cooper, your conservative Catholic from Columbus, Ohio.
I'm Rebecca Kushmider, your liberal Democrat from Kensington, Maryland.
And The More Perfect Union is one of the fastest growing political podcasts on iTunes. The More Perfect Union can also be found on YouTube, Facebook, and at our website, moreperfectunionpodcast.com, where you can also find host bios and commentaries. Well, as has been every week in the Trump presidency, it's been a busy week in the news. To me, the big story this week was two things you can't get away from in this world are death and taxes, but Trump is trying to change one of those for the rich. He doesn't necessarily want them to escape death. He just wants them to escape the death tax and all the other taxes that hit them.
Well, you know what I loved about this, and I'm sure Molly has seen this before. It didn't look so much as like a tax proposal from someone really weighty and deep. It looked like maybe a high school or a freshman senior's paper. It was one page, double spaced, and I'm sure he was like, "Can we move the lines in and we'll bulletproof? We'll put really big bulletproofs."
Right. This is what we call an outline, not a rough draft.
Just put the big ideas on paper. And I was expecting like graphs and footnotes and we'll see like, oh, let's look at graph page 34 and we'll go to then page 324 to see what our actual savings. No.
Supplement 20A and
I think that there was actually a maniacal genius in what he did because, first of all, it was pretty obvious to the whole world that he wanted to release something within the 100 days. He clearly couldn't release a full tax plan, so they introduced this theory of the tax plan or vision of the tax plan that he'd like to pass. But the reason that I think it's brilliant is...
Blueprint for America tax plan.
Yeah, right. That all of his supporters will hear it and think, well, we got that because he says he's going to give it to us. And so he'll get credit for that tax plan, even though it's in no way the final tax bill that will be voted on in the House or the Senate.
Right. And this is something that drives me nuts about the media right now. They use the words proposal and plan interchangeably. Like, this is the Trump tax plan. I mean, it's a proposal. It's the Trump tax proposal. He is proposing this and he will hand it to Kevin Brady at the Ways and Means and say, do something from this outline.
Not rough draft. It's an outline.
Last minute assignment. And, you know, because all tax policy has to emanate out of the House of Representatives. So, yeah, so everyone keeps saying, this is the Trump tax plan. I'm like, it's not a freaking plan. I mean, he can plan all he wants, but, you know, the House and Senate are going to laugh at him.
Well, Obama did the same thing with health care. He released his principles, and he waited for the House and then the Senate to come up with actual bills that had to be worked on and refined, but he never came forward with an ACA proposal of his own. He just had a set of 4 or 5 principles. So I find myself once again defending Donald Trump. That's because he knew the
difference between legislating and being an executive. He'd read the Constitution and noticed those were different.
You know, again, just to go back to it, maybe that is the correct P word, is principles. It's not a plan. It's not even a proposal. It's principles.
Right. And the principle is to screw the middle class.
How can you make that assumption when we don't even have what the brackets are? So, you know, being that there's no line delineated, I think we're jumping ahead.
Didn't he indicate what the 3 brackets are supposed to be?
Yes, I mean, like, as in, like, these 3 percentages, but, like, the cutoffs, which are a very important piece of information if you want to know who's getting screwed.
It really is. I'm sitting there, I'm like, am I going down or up? Because
Yeah, so what do you guys think of the principles? Now that we've agreed that it's not a plan, that it's not a proposal, it's just a set of principles, Molly, you're the economist in our group. What do you think?
Okay, so I think that I like the flatter aspect of it. I like there only being 3 brackets. There's a whole lot of shenanigans that go on with all these multiple layer of brackets, and the more complicated it is, the more it incurs costs on people to get their taxes done, and it causes all kinds of disincentives. You butt up against things. I use in my gender and labor markets class, we talk about the effect of tax policy. It's one of the tougher chapters of tax policy and women's decision whether or not to work outside the home. And, this whole marriage penalty issue that, and it's not just a simple answer like, if you're relatively wealthy or you're relatively poor. In fact, I use a New York Times graphic that's like this ink blot almost that shows that you have, you can be you can be very poor and have a marriage penalty, and you can be very poor and have a marriage subsidy. So if it's flatter, it will help with those kind of things. And then,
well, what do you think about getting rid of the alternative minimum tax?
I personally think the AMT long outlived its usefulness. When it was initially put in, it was supposed to,
yes.
It was supposed to affect a handful of very wealthy families in the 1970s, and suddenly it started getting to the point that it was sweeping in 10% of the population or something like that.
Yeah, so I favor getting rid of the AMT, and I favor, that's the second part that I like about it, is getting rid of the deductions, but to a point. One thing that I didn't immediately notice, but I saw today on one of the morning shows, is one of the deductions that right now is not provided for in the, let's call it the principles or the outline, is the deduction for your taxes, your property taxes, your state taxes, and your local tax. And that just seems kind of cuckoo to me, to be taxing you on income that you're you're literally like giving at the office at that point. And so and that's going to be in particular for our friends on the east and west coasts that have very high taxes. I mean, I don't see moderate Republican congressmen from those districts signing off on that, nor should they.
Well, the governors aren't going to sign off on it. This is where you're going to see the governors kind of come together and you're going to have to provide a deduction for state and local taxes, because otherwise we're going to get hammered. That's even Republican governors are going to have a problem with that.
So, Greg, what do you think of this tax proposal, this set of principles?
Well, I see a lot of tax cuts, and I just find myself wondering. So we see a lot of tax cuts, and I see a lot of tax cuts, but where's the money then going to pay down the debt and all this money that the Republicans were so concerned about 6 months ago that they were rallying about?
Okay, it's growth. It's two sides of the coin.
And yes, and please, I understand Lafner.
No, it's not even Lafner. It's that all of a sudden, you're saying, why aren't the Republicans concerned about the deficit? And of course, the Republicans and conservatives are saying, why are all the liberals all of a sudden concerned about the deficit?
Exactly. I am. Well, right. It's your show. It's your show now.
Pendulum, man.
Hey, leadership sucks. I agree. But so, yeah, and that's actually my concern is, I would love to give tax cuts to everybody. And infrastructure, that we see bills coming up for infrastructure, which I think we all agree would be awesome. Except for wall building, which I don't count as infrastructure. But where's this money coming from? And I think VA spending should be up. I think all these things. There's all sorts of money that big government, which I love big government. I'm a huge big government guy. Why can't the government be bigger? But where is this money going to come from if we don't keep taxes? If not, I know no one's actually won on raising taxes. Where's Mondale will renew them?
I was just thinking of that SNL skit when you mentioned that.
I know, but so that's my only issue is, I don't see this one. I see this one like a turd in the punch bowl.
Here's what I've never understood, other than proper English. Here's what I've never understood. It would be so simple for people like Molly, like Cliff, who believe in conservative economic principles, to draft a tax plan that does lower the rates marginally for the wealthy, that does get rid of some tax loopholes, as we call them, but it's still fairer to the middle class and to the working class. Why do they always come up with these draconian proposals that strip $5 trillion out of revenues and basically only help the rich? And please don't try to sell me that this plan has been crafted to help the middle class and the working class. That is pure BS. 90% of the savings go to the wealthy. He still wants to keep carried interest. He wants to lower the rate on S corporations to 15%. It's such a giveaway to the upper class of this country. Why do they have to do it that way?
Because tax policy is more political than policy. They're not actually looking to balance a revenue sheet. It's all about.
That's what I don't get, and that's what I'm asking the conservatives. Why not just do it with integrity and in a way that's actually going to work?
Okay, so I have not seen the that the carried interest deduction is off the table yet, and I think it should be. I think all of these loopholes are just ridiculous.
No, it's still in the plan.
Okay, so well, it shouldn't be, but I don't know where you get this 92%, because again, if he hasn't like drawn the brackets yet, it can't be scored. So I mean, are these just things that people are just making up?
Molly.
Yeah, okay. So, but so right now, the bottom, I just looked at the data by quintile because I'm kind of a geek that way. And, the bottom quintile in America pays effective negative 2% tax because they get more money back in the EITC and returnable credits. Even the second quintile gets a negative 1%. The top quintile pays 83% of the taxes. So, I mean, if you cut taxes,
that's irrelevant. That is irrelevant.
How is that irrelevant?
It is absolutely irrelevant because we have an economy that needs a certain amount of revenue to maintain the basic America that we all believe in, including a strong defense, including public education. And the idea that you are going to switch out the current tax plan for a plan that increases the national debt by $5 trillion or more over 10 years, and gives massive tax cuts to the wealthy on the I dream of genie-like premise that economic growth is somehow going to expand.
Well, they did cut taxes quite sharply in the 80s, and federal revenues doubled.
And the deficit went from $1 trillion to $4 trillion.
But that was also had to do with the drawdown of the Cold War.
No. Revenues doubled. Revenues. I didn't say anything. It actually the deficit did. The debt did go up because the cuts to spending never materialized, but the revenues did double. Just revenues.
Yes, and when Bill Clinton raised taxes, we had a surplus in 5 years.
Well, that was the Cold War drawing down.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so you guys only want to apply facts to like when it works for you. It's always what Bill Clinton did had nothing to do with economics. It was about the tech boom and it was about the Cold War running down. But the fact is, Ronald Reagan cut taxes and it did not help the economy. It exploded the debt.
No way. No.
It did not help the
Ronald
economy.
Reagan took office. We were in the Great Recession of 1981, 1982. He created
and we were out of that
3 million jobs in a much smaller economy. What are you saying to not help the economy?
Which is when
the 80s were very
when
prosperous.
Did he pass his tax cut? When was Ronald Reagan's tax bill passed?
I believe it was August of 1981.
No, it was 1986. His major tax cut was in 1986.
There were two tax bills, Kevin. There were two tax bills. There was one in 81 and one in 86.
And okay, one last thing I do have to get in. So the tax rates are progressive. It does, as income rises, as quintile rises, it gets up. The top, the top 50 don't, or the bottom 50 don't pay that much, but then you get to the next 25, they pay more, the next 5 pay more, or the next 10 pay more, the next 5 pay more, until you get to that 1%. And that's where all of a sudden we see it curl back down, because they have the best tax preparers and lawyers and shelters, and that needs to, change. We need to go after that. But other than that, we have a very progressive tax system.
Yeah, and I will also say that I would like to see the corporate shelters, i.e. the stuff that Apple and a number of other tech companies do, where they're holding, $1 trillion overseas. I would like to see that curtailed very strongly. If only because, even from a free trade perspective, that's bottling up I think the technical term is a metric shit ton of money overseas.
I would like to bottle up a metric shit ton of money in my bank account. That would be so cool.
On the topic of a metric shit ton of money, Barack Obama was in the news this week, speaking to the people who have several metric shit tons of money, Wall Street. Actually, he hasn't spoken to them yet, but he accepted a gig to speak to some Wall Street firm. Was it Goldman Sachs? For a reported $400
Cantor
million.
Fitzgerald, right?
Yeah, it was Cantor Fitzgerald.
Oh, Cantor Fitzgerald for $400,000. And all of a sudden, the conservatives are up in arms that a former president who will never hold elective office again is somehow tainting the public discourse by making a paid speech.
It wasn't just the conservative. It was also liberals. It was the far left, because Lord knows I got it from both sides this week.
Bernie supporters, Elizabeth Warren specifically.
Yeah, exactly. So it was the left and the right. Let's be fair today. For once, let's be fair.
You know what? I don't care. I mean, again, I think Kevin's right on this. He can talk to whoever he wants for however much money he wants, up until the point, like if Michelle starts to have a run, then I think that needs to be shut down. But for now, no.
She's not
going
to
No, I don't think she will. I'm just saying, if she were to, then I would like to see that shut down. But for now, go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't care.
The fact that he accepted that speech is absolute proof that she never intends to run, because she couldn't run after he took that money. But the point is, former presidents have always cashed in. They always will cash in. If anybody thinks Donald Trump is not going to cash in, he's cashing in today. So the idea that he won't be cashing in after...
Oh, hell, Bristol Palin cashed in after her mother failed to get elected to the VP slot and then quit being governor.
Bristol Palin's baby daddy cashed in.
Oh, that's right. He wrote...
No. He had the pistachio campaign.
The trend of former presidents cashing in is actually pretty recent, truth be told. Truman and Hoover both ended up being fairly poor towards the end of their lives, if I recall correctly. The reason the president has a post-presidential salary now is, in fact, because I forget which one it was, but basically Congress had to save one of them from the poorhouse.
Oh, dear. It's kind of sad.
That is sad. Yeah, Obama deserves. I mean, if someone wants to pay someone that much money at this point, power to him. The man is working. Awesome. Good for him. He's hustling.
Yeah. Well, Trevor Noah made a good point. He commented that the first black president should also be the first president to not accept money after his office, and then he had a very pithy directed comment that Kevin would have to bleep if I repeated it.
And another one of the non-story stories was Trump being interviewed about the presidency. And among many things that he said that are kind of off the wall was that he thought the presidency would be easier, and he thought his life would be easier than his old life once he got into the White House. Rebecca, how did you feel about hearing that?
I flipped my damn lid. I'm a DC person. I worked with public servants. My husband was a public servant for many years working on Capitol Hill. Government and public service and advocacy and lobbying and all of this is my life. It is my heartbeat. I care so deeply about the functioning of our government. And to have this dilettante, this absolute amateur sitting in the highest office of the land and going, oh yeah, I actually thought this was going to be easy. It is such an insult to everybody I know and to how hard they've worked and how hard they've studied and the amount of information that they have to take in and analyze and put back out there in functional ways that are actually doing good for the American people. And they're doing it with long hours and much lower pay than they could get in the private sector. And here's this schmuck in a bad to pay who's like, oh, I thought this would be easy. Like, well, no shit, Sherlock. It's not easy because it matters and it's important.
Cliff, when you hear stuff like that, I mean, how does it strike you?
Nothing there really surprises me for two reasons. The first is that anybody who's not, hip deep in this stuff doesn't really get how much of a pain in the ass politics can be. And politics is a pain from the perspective of, almost any position in it for a whole host of reasons. The other thing, though, is there are times when I will say that I don't think it comes across as hard to, from the elected official side, because, Rebecca, what you're talking about is the civil servant side. You have a lot of elected officials who, quite frankly, make Jim, I would say, yes, some of them work very, very hard. Let me get that out of the way. They put in the time to know what they're saying. And then you have the Jim Hackers of the world to be DJ for the evening since he's not here. Congressmen.
You don't have nearly as good a beard
congressmen,
as DJ.
cabinet secretaries, etc., who you could probably slip them an upside-down issue stance in their briefing packet for a press conference, and they would read it and not realize they had made an error until they were called out on the evening news. So I suspect Trump was expecting more elements of the latter, where his handlers would, he's used to his handlers taking care of most everything. He was expecting his handlers to take care of more than they are able to in certain respects.
Okay, I see it as the same people who, whenever they say things like, oh, you're a teacher, Greg? And I bet Molly gets this too. They go, I bet teaching's easy. I could probably be a teacher. and they go, oh, I bet they do this to Molly too. Oh, you teach economics? I'm really good at math. I bet I could do that. Or
Oddly, I don't get that with teaching economics.
Oh, really? I was about to say I'm pretty good at I'm pretty good at math. I'm sure I balance the checkbook. But I get that all the time. Like, I bet I could be a teacher. No, you can't. Working with students is hard. I mean, to teach a thought is difficult, and to do anything that someone else does for years and years, there's a process. And without having any concept of walking into a job and saying, gosh, I just thought this would be easy, shows a complete naivety or ignorance, especially since for the past 8 years, he's just been criticizing it. And if it's so difficult, why is he spending so much time on the golf course? Why isn't he saying, and I remember the promise, you would never see me on the golf course. You couldn't get me out of that White House, that promise on the campaign trail. If it's so difficult,
he went golfing today, by the way.
I know.
But in Virginia, so it's cheaper.
That doesn't bother me that much. I mean, if he's working at White House South. But why is he spending so much time away from actually doing work? It's like he's not even trying.
Well, how do you define the not working? Because a lot of his trips to Florida have been at least in some significant part, working trips. He's had multiple foreign dignitaries down at Mar-a-Lago, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like he's just spent 25 days down there snoozing. He has been getting, at the very least, diplomatic work done after a fashion.
How long does a round of golf take? I don't know. I honestly don't know since I play frisbee golf.
It's a couple hours.
It's between 3.5 to 5 hours.
3.5 to 5 hours to do what should be a photo op.
I think when the Secret Service clears the course for you, it's definitely on the 3.5.
Probably
end of the spectrum.
But
so,
he's
Kevin,
older.
what is this question you have for me? I'm like dying with anticipation.
Will you marry me? No. I'm dying to ask. What I wanted to postulate this the Trump comment against. I've seen on Facebook, Molly, you talk about your students. These are college students, and you are harder on them than you are on the president of the United States. You don't take guff from any kid who needs, like, who wants to take their test a day earlier, a day later, so they could be on the, what is it?
Pub crawl. The senior pub crawl.
The senior pub crawl.
Damn straight.
So how is that different than the president playing golf?
So, I just, with Donald, we have a reality show president, and it's part of his shtick.
Why are you cutting him this slack? You don't do it for kids who are sophomores in college.
No, they're seniors. They're going on the senior pub
I stand
crawl.
corrected.
Yes, they're supposed to be graduating.
Yeah.
Corrected.
Yes.
Rebecca, you have found the flaw
No.
in my theory.
It's his shtick. It's, he's just like, and part of it is, he's got to say that it's harder than he thought, because what else is the reason for him not having done in 100 days, which he said would be, easy to just get this all done. And like almost none of it's gotten done.
So here's what I think. I think we need to build the damn wall. I think Congress needs to authorize the wall and get started building the freaking wall so that he can say he has a win, and then he will just disappear to a golf course for the remainder of the 4 years. And whenever he sort of raises his head and be like, hey, what about, oh no, look at the wall. Look at the wall, Donald. Look at the wall. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Look at the wall. And that's how we can just not really have Trump as president. Just build the wall.
Okay, so now,
And on that note,
just on that note, no, I wanted to end the podcast on a slightly lighter topic. We talked a few weeks ago about our favorite political books. I was wondering what you guys would name as your favorite political films or movies. Rebecca, do you have any that come to mind?
yeah, I love Bulworth. I love the story of a politician who snaps and just kind of loses it and starts rapping on TV and dropping incredible truth, while hiring Halle Berry to kill him.
And Greg?
There's two I'm going to name. One, Bob Roberts. I love.
Very funny.
Oh, that's a
Very
great
It's
movie.
it's very funny.
Such a good
I remember seeing it and I was like, yes, I think that's what politics is really about. It's
The story
really,
of a folk singing political candidate, right?
yeah, and it's really dark and
Yeah, but he's like a weird Christian conservative folk singing, but he.
we don't know that for a fact. Hey, spoilers.
What's it been out like for 10 years or something?
Yeah, if you haven't seen it yet.
Try 20.
And then the other one, this one came out in the early 70s, I think it's with Robert Redford. It's called The Candidate.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
1970.
Yeah, and it has to do with no one thought that he could win. He was a throwaway candidate, and it turns out he does a great job, and he starts doing things his way, and he's young and idealistic, and it's just a really, really, and it's also Robert Redford when he was really still acting, and he wasn't just chewing the scenery, like Downhill Skier and that sort of stuff. It's a really, really, if you've never seen The Candidate, it's really good. So,
Oh, yeah, it's a must-see. What about you,
it
Cliff?
really is.
I'm going to throw two out there as well. The first is Primary Colors, which I loved when I was middle school. Hi there, I'm a political geek. How are you doing today? But it was a...
Really? When I was in middle school, I was watching movies like Heathers.
Yeah.
So.
The second one that I'm going to throw out there that's going to be a little bit offbeat is Catching Fire, the second Hunger Games movie, and it's because you see a very interesting presentation of control or lack thereof of a media campaign at the core of it. That was more interesting than the shiny story about the these kids fighting each other to the death, blah blah blah. The fascinating story was the regime's propagandists, these groups of propagandists working effectively, quietly working against each other to control the narrative of what was going on in that empire. And it's not something you've tended to see in, I will say, popular fiction. And it's, I would say, sort of masked by the fact that it's in, mass market popular fiction, but it's there. And it's very beautifully done.
Great. Molly, what about you?
Well, I like my political, I guess, pop culture to be more like, TV shows that can evolve over time. So, but in terms of a movie, since I have to name one, I'll just go with, Dave. It's schlocky and cheesy, but,
it's actually a great movie.
It really is.
Yeah, I remember that being...
It's charming.
It's a really good movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin Kline's wonderful.
He is.
And
Yeah,
Sigourney
Sigourney
Weaver.
Weaver's in it.
Yeah.
And it was probably the first movie that set up the trope of evil chief of staff.
Interesting.
yeah.
What about you, Kevin?
Well, I have two, but they're not necessarily movies about political campaigns, so I'm broadening my definition of political movies. My all-time favorite is a 1964 film called Failsafe, starring Henry Fonda and Larry Hagman in one of his first acting roles.
Wow.
And it's about it's actually very contemporary to what's going on in the world today, because it's much like Dr. Strangelove. It's about an accidental launch, or you see the escalation of a potential nuclear confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. Again, it's circa 1964, in the heart of the Cold War, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Henry Fonda plays the president. And I'm just curious, who here has seen it?
No, I haven't, but I'm interested in it. I'm a big Larry Hagman fan back from the Dallas day.
I saw both the original and the live presentation.
Great. Well, Cliff, then you can bear me out on this. I'm a fan of the original, and I'm sure you'll bear me out on this. For those of you who haven't seen it, if you can find a copy, 1964 Failsafe, you will not be disappointed. It is a terrific film. It's in black and white. It is not a fast-paced film, but it is a great, taut, dense drama. And my other one that I wanted to mention on a little bit of a lighter note is a movie about the blacklist and McCarthyism of the 1950s. It's a movie called The Front.
Oh, yeah.
It's starring Woody Allen.
Woody Allen.
One of the few Woody Allen movies that he neither wrote nor directed. He just starred in it. And he plays a Woody Allen type nebbishy character living in New York City in the late 1940s. His best friend is a blacklisted TV writer who can no longer work because his name is on the blacklist. And he asks his friend, who's just like a cashier and a numbers runner, he's just a low-level schnook, and he asks him if he can use his name to sell his scripts so he can continue making a living. And if you've never seen it, again, it's just a charming, funny, and yet very moving film. Zero Mostel is in it, gives one of his great performances. And the ending credits, I'm not going to say much about it, but you have to watch through the ending credits because they will blow you away.
Oh, yeah, and the last scene is awesome, too.
Yeah, the last scene where he's testifying in front of a congressional committee is really wonderful.
It's wonderful. Oh, I'll add one more now I think about it. Kisses for My President is a Fred MacMurray film.
Fred MacMurray?
I don't know it.
Kisses for My President is the story of the first male first lady. Yeah, it's up there with The Apartment for Fred MacMurray films. And so he spends the whole movie, his wife gets elected president, and he's like, so they're like, here's your office, Mr. First Lady, and they can't figure out what to call him. And his office is like this little dainty desk. He has to do all these teas, and he's like, and it's Fred MacMurray, so he's like 7 feet tall, and he's like, and he's got a staff with all these beauticians, because it's like 1960 something, or it's awesome.
Right.
Yeah,
Jackie
it's
Kennedy.
so great of a film. And it talks, and he's like, I think I want to do something else. And they're like, oh, do you want to put on like, do you want to be in charge of the Easter egg hunt? Or he goes, well, he goes, I'm a lawyer. And they're like, oh, well, that's great. Good for you. Good for you, Fred MacMurray.
Ooh, dealing with reverse sexism in the 60s.
I know. It's like he's Michael Keaton.
So that's
That's a good film.
And with that, I want to offer kisses for our listeners. Thank you for joining us. Please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Facebook at facebook.com/More Perfect Union Podcast. And share our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can discover us as well. And if you would like to join our political discussions between shows, you can join us in our political group on Facebook. It's called Open Fire Politics. We're all there, and we'd love to see you there, too. Gang, this has been a raucous show.
Where I suspect the aftercast is going to be somehow dull.
Yes, it's going to be dull.
We've used all our best material here.